Let's talk about Niger, okay? I have a couple of updates for you, and I'll begin with ECOWAS and their threat to invade Niger. Okay, so ECOWAS is a regional bloc made up of 15 countries. It's called the Economic Community of West African States. And basically, Nigeria, okay, which is really just doing France's and America's bidding here, has been pushing for this military intervention to basically send forces into Niger. And, you know, some of the countries in ECOWAS are for this, some are against. And, you know, they try to frame it like it's about restoring democracy in Niger. It's not about that. This is the you know, curated nonsense that you'll hear on Sky News or something. What they want is to restore Bazoum. They want to restore the old regime because he was very, very friendly and on good terms with the United States and with France. He is the one who allowed them to put their military bases in Niger. He is the one who has turned a blind eye to the theft of his own country's resources, notably the uranium that France has been siphoning off, you know, stealing, plundering for decades, and so desperately needs. So the French are in a very awkward position because they don't want you to understand, they don't want the world to understand that, yes, they are still a colonial power in Niger and in West Africa. They can't show their hand. So instead of the French saying, well, you know what, we're going to come in and you know, get Bazoum out and put him back in power, what they're doing is they're moving through ECOWAS. Okay, so they make it look like, oh, look, it's the Africans who they by themselves, you know, they of their own accord have acted with benevolence to restore the rule of democracy, right? That's what they want it to look like, because, you know, the optics have changed today. Yes, colonialism is still present, but they don't have, you know, they can't act with the same boldness that they used to, even though, as I said, the bases are there. The theft is still ongoing. All right. So now ECOWAS is split. They came to a decision after the deadline passed. The deadline was August 6th, right? So they basically told Niger, they told the junta, the military junta in Niger, you either restore Bazoum or we're coming in. And then the clock is ticking. It's midnight. Bazoum is not back in power. He's still, you know, under house arrest. The junta did absolutely nothing because they you know, they don't easily bend to threats. And ECOWAS did nothing because they can do nothing. Like I said, they are split internally. Okay, so even despite passing this decision, it doesn't mean anything. On top of that, they were supposed to have a meeting in the last 24 hours. Also didn't take place, but they're saying, oh, there were some technical errors or something. And the other thing you have to consider is that Niger's military, they are very, very seasoned fighters. Remember, up until this point, up until the 26th of July, the United States and France, they put their bases, they put them in multiple African countries, and the French were kicked out, right, of Mali and Burkina Faso. But specifically in Niger, they considered Niger to be their strongest ally in the fight against jihadists, right? Jihadists, which, guess who created them? The United States and France. So this is a very confusing situation for them because they want to, you know, they want to appeal to the troops that they have invested in, that they have helped train, right? Oh, you're our friends. And now they realize that actually they are not viewed as friends and they are not welcome in Niger. And I'll get to that in a second. It's very, very important about one of the generals leading this coup and his relationship to the Americans. Let me just show you the reaction from the people in Niger to the sanctions that ECOWAS have put on Niger, to the travel restrictions, the travel bans and freezing of assets. And by the way, Niger themselves have closed the border and closed the airspace in response to this threat of a military intervention. But let me show you the people of Niger, what they have to say.
Là aujourd'hui pour vraiment exprimer notre mécontentement par rapport à la décision de la CEDEAO qui menace
in French, ECOWAS is CEDEAO.
Attaquer le Niger. Nous, on n'est pas d'accord. On n'est pas d'accord aujourd'hui, on ne sera pas d'accord demain. Nous, on veut la paix. Parce que dans ce pays-là, nous, on vit en symbiose. Tout le collectif de communautés de l'espace CEDEAO résidant au Niger vit très bien avec les autorités nigériennes. Et nous, on soutient les nouvelles autorités. La patrie ou la mort, nous vaincrons.
Nous leur disons de privilégier les voies diplomatiques. Il faut privilégier les voies diplomatiques. Il y a toujours des solutions diplomatiques pour résoudre ce genre de problème parce que ce n'est pas la première fois que ça arrive en Afrique et dans la sous-région. Nous avons déjà des pays voisins qui ont connu cela et le père de la nation ivoirienne disait toujours « Asseyons-nous et discutons » car le dialogue c'est l'âme des forts, non la guerre.
Yeah, let me show you some more.
Une démonstration à l'ensemble des pays de la CEDEAO et de tous ceux qui sont en train de prendre des mesures impopulaires et inhumaines envers le Niger qui est en train de se libérer du joug de la colonisation.
Par devoir envers le peuple nigérien est conscient de la gravité du moment que vit notre pays.
Very important note. You saw his name, Tiane. So he is now the de facto leader of Niger. Okay? De facto leader.
Que vit notre pays, nous sommes toujours restés avec humilité à l'écoute de toutes les parties concernées et ouverts au dialogue pour qu'une fois l'émotion passée chez les uns et les autres, nous puissions ensemble créer les conditions d'une transition apaisée devant déboucher dans un délai relativement court et raisonnable à des élections générales, mais surtout une meilleure approche dans notre lutte contre le terrorisme et les autres maux économiques et sociaux qui minent le développement du Niger.
You know, I find funny is that you have not just the United States and France, but a lot of the countries doing their bidding in Europe and in Africa alike, who are threatening Niger with cutting off aid. Now, the thing is that Niger is already one of the poorest countries in the world. Go figure, right? Because they've been plundering it, just like they've been plundering the rest of Africa and Arabia for centuries. So what difference does it make? This is what people don't understand. The attitude in Niger is that we are screwed either way with you guys. So we're going to go our own way and do things our own way. We've seen what, your friendship means and how much your humanitarian assistance means and your military aid. We've seen what these things are. The jihadists are still here. They are here in the first place because you did that. You destabilized Iraq. You destabilized Libya. You created and allowed these groups to thrive in the first place. And then you propose the solution. So you make money by arming us, right? Every pair of boots, every helmet, every bullet. Someone is making money off of those things. And those corporations are in France. They're in Britain. They're in the United States. Not in Niger. And then they put the bases there and they never leave because the problem is never fixed. So that's the attitude. That is the attitude. They don't care. They don't want your military aid and they don't want your humanitarian assistance. They don't want anything to do with you. Niger has now cut off and suspended 5 defense accords with France. And the French response to that, they're not happy with it. They say that, well, you cannot do that because the legitimate leader and president of Niger, Bazoum, did not cancel them. And since he's the one who signed them, goodbye, man, bye. Bazoum is not coming out. He's not going to unsign and cancel anything. These guys are in charge and they've canceled it. Goodbye. So the French now are made to look like fools. They have been made to look like fools, right? And it's just a question of time before that base is gone. Look, it happened next door. It happened, as I said, in Burkina Faso and in Mali. Look at the map I showed you in the beginning. This is just since 2020. So in the last 3 years, look how many coups you've had in this precise, exact region. Guinea, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. There's a reason for this, because they're fed up. They're fed up of neocolonialism. They're fed up of this money, this CFA franc, which is a currency that is minted in France. That's not independence. That's neocolonialism. In every form, economic, military, cultural, even French. You heard the videos. People speak French because it was forced upon them, just like it was forced upon countries in the Middle East and other countries in Africa, right? This is a legacy of colonialism. It doesn't mean there's nothing wrong with speaking many languages, but there's a difference when it was forced upon you. Yes?
L'ensemble des Nigériens, l'ensemble des citoyens apportent leur soutien à la CNSP, c'est-à-dire la gente au pouvoir. Donc, ils ont notre soutien, alhamdulillah.
There's a typo down here. I think someone meant to write Nigerians, not Nigerians, right? So it says A, but it's supposed to be E, right? Again, I shouldn't have to say this, as I'm sure most of you know, but Nigeria and Niger are two completely different countries. Yes.
Apportent leur soutien à la CNSP, c'est-à-dire la gente au pouvoir. Donc, ils ont notre soutien, alhamdulillah. Et nous sommes contre les sanctions prises par la CEDEAO et l'UEMOA. Nous sommes contre ces sanctions.
J'ai un message au peuple, plus précisément au président du CNSP.
When they talk about the CNSP, that is the formal name of the junta or the coup leaders. Okay. Again, I remember playing the speech to you, the announcement on the 26th. Straight to the point.
Nous voulons qu'il fasse une audit. Les gens qui ont pris l'argent de l'État, ils sont là. Ils sont dans ce pays-là. Ouais. Et il ne faudrait pas qu'ils nous déçoivent. Ouais. Le peuple est sorti, il y a une masse.
Yeah, see what it says there? It says, "Abat la France, vive le CNSP." So they're saying down with France and long live the CNSP, which, as I said, are the new government, right?
Qui s'est jamais produit depuis 1960. Il ne faut pas qu'il déçoive le peuple.
So he's saying people that have stolen the money of this country, the corrupt ones, they're still here, right? And we don't want the new, the military leadership, the coup leaders, to let us down. That's what he's saying. You notice the Russia flags everywhere? Look at the size of this protest. 30,000 people. This is just one protest. It's just one. You got these happening every single day in Niamey and elsewhere. Right? Niamey is the capital. 30,000 people. Look at this.
L'objectif de la mobilisation,
the aim of the demonstration is to show the whole world and the international community that we are 100% behind the agent who has taken power, which is the CNSP. They have their support. They have the support of the population. We went out to lend a hand. So that's the contribution we can make.
Donc c'est la contribution que nous pouvons faire.
I mean, to say that this putsch doesn't have legitimacy is, would be ridiculous. This is very, very clearly supported by the people, because since 1960, so that's when Niger officially became quote unquote independent, which we know is not true because they've been under France's control ever since, and before. People know what that brought. It brought them absolutely nothing. And the Russia flags are kind of funny because it shows you that the coup is a rejection of France, and the Russia flags are a rejection in general of the West and the direction that the West is taking Niger in. Again, if you look at any index, right? So Human Development Index, whatever you like, Niger is usually going to be at the bottom or the second, last country. So even in a quantifiable sense, in a statistical sense, you can prove with the numbers, you can show exactly what following France and the US has brought Niger. Fuck all. That's what it's brought Niger. Nothing. Here, some more videos, and I want to show you these because it's important you see the people there themselves, what they actually say.
Mais tout sauf la France. Nous ne voulons plus de la France. La France doit... Et si même la France a honte, moi à la place de la France, Wallah, je ne veux même pas parler du Niger. Vraiment, ils ont honte. Macron a honte. Et Billahi l'a dit. Wallah, je vous assure, s'il plaît à Dieu, que ce soit Tinubu, que ce soit Macron, que ce soit les États-Unis, tous ceux qui ont un main invisible derrière les pays africains, plus particulièrement le Niger.
Je me présente au nom de Issoumegedi Issa Bahari, étudiant et citoyen lambda. Chers frères et sœurs, amis de lutte, l'éminent peuple nigérien, recevez mes sincères salutations amicales et patriotiques.
Je suis Hamza Touyaye, j'ai été journaliste pendant 15 ans à l'ORTN. À cause de mes opinions politiques, j'ai dû quitter la télévision nationale. Maintenant, ce matin, je suis venu marcher avec l'ensemble du peuple nigérien. C'est une marche républicaine pour dire non à la petite France, non au petit Macron, qu'on ne veut plus des troupes françaises chez nous.
Yeah, I'm not surprised they fired her, right? Because you see what a hold the France has, a cultural and political hold on the country, right? This is also known as la France-Afrique, right? It's like it's a mesh of the word of France and Africa, France-Afrique. So it is the idea, the very essence of neocolonialism, because the French really, they just wouldn't let go of their African colonies. So what De Gaulle and the French government to this day have done is pursue a politic of France-Afrique. It's this mirage, this complete charade of that. It's a partnership between France and Africa, and France will encourage whatever development their former colonies want, but without overstepping boundaries and making sure what it's really about is maintaining French influence in Africa, period. That's it. That's all you need to know, period. It is about keeping control of former, quote-unquote, former French colonies. That's what it is. Niger is a prime example of that. And that is why this coup is so important, because it's a rejection of that. Now I begin with my favorite part. I was just warming up. The queen bitch, Victoria Nuland, neocon of neocons, decided to come to Niger. I wonder why. So she went to Niger to try and speak with the coup leaders. They wouldn't even meet with her. They wouldn't even meet with her. It's the best response. The best response. So let me show you this. All right. So there are two good pieces here. I'm reading to you from the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Okay. So Victoria Nuland, she went to Niger despite the airspace being closed, which is weird, right? Obviously, the CIA or the State Department have some flight. They flew her in. The French are also violating Niger's airspace by continuing to run planes in, right? But again, they're just friends, right? They're not here to step on anyone's toes. So basically, she went to meet with Tiani, and he said no. And she had to sit down with 3 colonels and a general. Okay, so they told Victoria Nuland, you are not allowed to meet with Bazoum, who's the deposed president, and you are not allowed to meet with Tiani, who's the head of the army and now the de facto leader of the country. Right? They wouldn't even give her 1 minute of their time. Now, she did sit down with this man. Now, he is a general, okay, who has been essentially groomed by the United States. They've been working on this guy for a couple of decades, right? So he's Brigadier General Moussa Barmou, right? And the Wall Street Journal describes him as long courted by Washington as a partner against Islamist extremism. So they thought that because he heads the special forces in Niger, and that, his troops have worked alongside the American troops for so long, yes, and they've cooperated together, and that, he went to the he went to the United States to study there, even, that they could influence him into reversing the coup. And he basically just told them to piss off. So she, Victoria Nuland, had to sit down with him. She had to sit down with a brigadier general, the head of Niger's special forces, that the United States themselves had been grooming and curating for years now, for decades actually, for 30 years, only to be told, no, goodbye, we do not accept any of your demands, and we do not care for any of your threats. Nothing. She left without a single breakthrough. So as the Wall Street Journal say, that Barmou is the guy the U.S. military courted for almost 30 years. He's a guy the U.S. sent to Washington, D.C.'s prestigious National Defense University. He has invited American officers to his home for dinner. And he's in charge of the elite special forces, crucial to stemming the flood of Al-Qaeda and Islamic State fighters across Western Africa. In the 2 weeks since Niger's coup, Barmou has emerged as the main diplomatic channel between the US and the junta. American officers and diplomats have his number in their cell phones and think he is their best chance of restoring democracy. Whenever you see the word, or the expression rather, of restoring democracy, what they mean is restoring American and French rule in Niger. Okay? Barmou sat down in Niamey, Niger's capital, for 2 hours on Monday with Victoria Nuland, the acting U.S. Deputy Secretary of State. Oh, my lady has been promoted, I see. She's been promoted. The queen bitch. Just to give you, as a quick side note, just to give you her rap sheet. This is from Code Pink. They did an excellent rundown. So, Victoria Nuland, as I just read to you, is now the number 2 in the entire State Department. So under Blinken, you will now have Victoria Nuland. Number 2. I mean, I've never seen someone fail upwards so well, right? She does better than most journalists in Britain and America, right? They lie and lie, and they get promoted and promoted. Lie some more, get promoted some more. And in Victoria Nuland's case, you bully and you kill some more and you get promoted more, right? So the entire problem in Ukraine right now, half of the problem in Ukraine is her doing, right? Not to give her too much credit, but you could say half. Easily. There's this famous phone call that she had that was leaked, where she's on the phone and she's talking about Ukraine, right? Because you remember when the Americans did this coup in 2014 in Ukraine, and the Ukrainian president had to flee to Russia, you had, by coincidence, a flood of American officials just out in the open running about Kiev, right? You had McCain, who's another neocon, and who also found himself with jihadists in Syria. What a coincidence. And Victoria Nuland, right? So she was there working, I would say behind the scenes, but she wasn't really behind the scenes. She was on stage. She was center stage doing this in front of everybody. And there's that phone call where she's like, "Fuck the EU," right? Which really embodies how much the Americans value their so-called relationship and partnership with Europe. There is no partnership. Europe is a vassal, right? It's a vassal continent to the Americans, right? As I said, even during my speech last week in London, the American strategy is that you keep Europe weak, you keep Europe under America's heel, and then use Europe to attack the Russians with. But just to quickly give you, as a side note, okay, her rap sheet. So Nuland was Dick Cheney's deputy national security advisor from 2003 to 2005 during the illegal U.S. invasion and occupation of Iraq. In 2005, she became ambassador to NATO, where she lobbied Europe to participate in the occupation of Afghanistan. In 2013, Nuland was nominated to act as Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, where she was supposed to employ diplomacy and relations with Russia, Ukraine, and former Soviet states. But instead, Nuland and the White House partnered with the Ukrainian far right. You know, like those people that I saw waving Nazi flags in London opposite the memorial for the women of World War II. Yeah, that far right in Ukraine. Funneling $5 billion at Ukraine to overthrow its democratically elected president and engineer a transition government to privatize Ukraine and prepare for war with Russia. Nuland passed out pastries during the Maidan coup before Viktor Yanukovych fled under a hail of bullets. Nuland was caught in the scandal involving the leaked phone call. Right, so this is exactly what I was talking to you about, when she says F the EU. Victoria Nuland is a dangerous war hawk, not a diplomat. She should be tried at The Hague, not elevated to run the State Department. What a brilliant ending. It's like as if I'd written it myself. I love it. No, but seriously, this is who they sent to Niger. You know, out of all the people in the United States, 320 million people in the United States, most of them good people. Who do they send to calm the situation in Niger? This bitch. Wow. I mean, I would seriously be offended and take that as a sign of aggression. I really mean that. I'm not saying that like, you know, figuratively. When you send Victoria Nuland, you are sending a bully. You are committing an act of aggression when you send this person. After what she's done, after what I just read to you, how many people she's killed, how many countries she's helped destroy. Jesus. I mean, she's the devil himself or herself. I don't say that often. I don't say that ever, but she's really the devil incarnate. That's who they sent. I wonder why she couldn't, you know, achieve a breakthrough. I wonder why. Anyway, so she had to sit down with a Nigerian general, right, that they had courted. And this is what happened, yes? So the talks proved frustrating. Nuland, knowing Bermu's long affinity for the United States, urged him to broker a deal that would allow Niger and its longtime Western allies to get back to fighting Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, and Boko Haram militants and stop the country from becoming another African outpost for Russia and its paramilitary Wagner group. Down here, you can see the drone base, which I've spoken to you guys about for a couple of years now. I mean, it's something that's cost $100 to $200 million. It's the largest drone base the Americans have in the world, and they put it in Niger, right? So it's basically a launching pad for attacking not just targets inside Niger, but anywhere they want. And of course, the Americans are not going to tell you, yeah, this is an imperialist outpost. No. They're going to tell you, we're your friends. We're only here to help you. We swear. We're just here to fight terrorists. You know, the bad guys. We're the good guys and they're the bad guys. Yes? Here's another base. Commando base over here and over here, right? So both to the southeast and to the west of Niger. And then you have a U.S. Special Operations Headquarters south of that. Also, these are near to both of them near the border with Burkina Faso. You can see here, they've highlighted the countries that support the coup in Niger in yellow and those who are against it in green. Remember, whenever you read a map, especially one that appears in the Western news, do you notice how they try to condition your brain? So Assad forces in Syria are always red, right? Red representing danger. The Russian forces, red, danger. And here, if you're against the coup, right? If you're against the Western puppet being removed, which you should be, then it's in green. Everybody should be against the coup, yes? We need our puppet back. Obviously, you shouldn't read too much into the colors, but it is something that you see in every goddamn map in Syria. Every goddamn map, without exception. So, the U.S. has spent some $500 million building up Niger's defense forces, including at least $110 million on the American-built drone base in the town of Agadez, and stations some 1,100 American troops in the country. In the wake of the military revolt, the US has suspended its training of Nigerian forces and cut some other military assistance to Niger. Should the State Department formally declare the uprising a coup, American law would require further reductions in military aid. The United States has vowed to continue food and other humanitarian assistance to Niger. Yes, well, I don't know how that's going to get there since the airspace has been closed and the borders have also been shut, both by Niger and the neighboring countries. Especially ECOWAS and the neighboring countries in ECOWAS. Forget Mali and Burkina Faso because they're on Niger's side. But, you're going to see a situation now, I guarantee you this, just like you saw in Venezuela, where they're going to say, why isn't Maduro letting any humanitarian assistance in? Same thing in Syria. Why isn't Bashar al-Assad letting any humanitarian assistance in? And in Niger, this will be all the more important because Niger, as I said, on the Human Development Index is number 2 or at the bottom of the list, right? So second last or at the bottom of the list. So they'll make a bigger stink out of it and say, look, this junta are not letting it the humanitarian, the benevolent, chivalrous aid that we, the Westerners, bestow upon our Nigerian subjects. They're not letting it in. They're irresponsible. They're unfit to run this country. Bring back Bazoum. We are concerned for Bazoum's health. Yeah, same song and dance. But they won't tell you that it's actually ECOWAS that have shut their borders, and that the French and Americans are perfectly capable of flying in planes when it comes to Victoria Nuland, or freeing some terrorists that are now suddenly needed to stir chaos in the country. Right? Those planes work absolutely fine, especially in violation of the closing of the airspace. But everything is the junta's fault. Barmou, the brigadier general, is well aware the coup could cost him critical combat support. No more joint training, nor tactical advice from U.S. Green Berets. Green Berets are the special forces in the U.S., or one of the special forces. Or American drones sending real-time surveillance. This is what Barmou said to the Wall Street Journal. Pay attention to this quote. It's very short. He said that, quote, if that is the price to pay for our sovereignty, then let it be. That's what Barmou wrote to the Wall Street Journal a few days after the coup, and he did not respond to any further questions for this article. I mean, from what I can see here, from what we can tell, it's no wonder Victoria Nuland was unable to break him, because she's dealing with someone with principles. If every Arab and African leader were like this, you would have no neocolonialism. You would have none. Unfortunately, the president of Nigeria is allowing himself to do the bidding of the French and the Americans. That this is a fact. This is what he's doing. He's not serving his own country. He is not serving any of the countries in ECOWAS. He's not serving Niger or the people of Niger. He's not doing any good for Africa, nor the Sahara Sahel. And he knows very well that if he starts sending in troops into Niger, that the whole place is going to be destabilized. And as a matter of fact, even the Russians now have said that, and not just said, they have warned ECOWAS against doing anything. And the Russians, for the time being, they are basically saying neither for nor against the coup, but in favor of a diplomatic settlement, right? And warning ECOWAS not to take any military action because it will destabilize the entire region. That's true. So this is what is happening right now. You have Western countries that are using ECOWAS to do their bidding to, as one of the people I showed you in the video mentioned, la main invisible, the invisible hand. This is how the levers of power work behind the scenes, right? And they do this often in other areas of the world, right? Just like you have in when it comes to Arab countries, you're going to have some Arab countries that are, being used to coerce, to bully, and to keep other Arab leaders in line, especially those who are becoming too independent and thinking too much for themselves, right? You saw, for example, recently Morocco. In Morocco, which is an amazing country, but unfortunately, the leadership, the king, in exchange for Israel recognizing Moroccan sovereignty and ownership of the Western Sahara, Morocco will now open an embassy in Israel. But things can change. Yep, things can change just as quickly as they can be gone as quickly as they came. I think with Saudi Arabia, that was a good example of how quickly the tides changed. But in this case, you cannot say that this is just the case of some, a bunch of officers that decided to get rid of the president, right? You can see from the number of people that are coming out on the street that this is the sentiment of the country. And I guarantee you, not everyone is going to like what is happening in Niger. I bet you're going to have a good chunk of people who are against the coup. Just like in every country, you're going to have people who disagree and those who agree with something. But in this case, the majority of people support this move. Not because they necessarily favor Tianhe or the junta, but because they know what the French have done, and this is a rejection of centuries of French colonialism. That's what this is about. This is what you need to understand. And like usual, in the press, they're just so blind to this. They just can't read the situation. So someone like Victoria Nuland, she thinks she could just come in and order them around and tell them what to do. They don't care. They do not care. And it's nothing to do with the Russians protecting them. The Pentagon themselves, Tony Blinken, the head of the State Department, he himself, they've all said that Russia has nothing to do with what's happening in Niger. Yes, Prigozhin is celebrating it, okay, head of Wagner, but just because there is real anti-colonial sentiment in Africa does not mean that it's not anything to do with Russia. Yeah, of course, Russia is going to exploit that. It should exploit that. Why shouldn't it? The Russians didn't colonize Africa like France and Belgium and Britain did. They just didn't, right? So obviously they have higher moral ground when it comes to that by a mile. So even if the Russians use that sentiment for whatever purpose, right? It doesn't change the fact that people in Africa, people in Arabia, literally, truly, legitimately feel that way. They are really genuinely sick of France. They're genuinely sick of Britain. After what happened, it's their right to be. The French would do well to tuck their tail between their legs and just leave the same way they left Mali and Burkina Faso and just get this over with quickly, because that base is not going to stay there for long. Now, one last note I will add, and this is pure speculation. Okay, this next point. The junta in Niger did not annul their military cooperation with the Americans. Okay? I told you they canceled 5 agreements, defense agreements with the French, meaning we want you gone. But they didn't do that with the Americans. Now, even though Victoria Nuland didn't make any progress, right, according to her and the State Department spokesperson, there could be, this is just I'm just speculation, but there could be an opening for the Americans to take the French place, and especially when it comes to the military base that the French have, and the exploitation and mining of uranium, gold, oil. Niger has everything, right? I think the reason people are coming out with Russia flags is because they like I said, it's a rejection of the West, and they would definitely prefer to have economic and military partnerships with the Russians over anybody else, because they know the difference between the West and Russia. But don't put it past the Americans, and don't put it past Victoria Nuland to screw the French, right? Just to give America a better cut, right? And to get one up over the French. Remember, this happened already with AUKUS. Remember, Australia had a deal with the French to build diesel submarines. The French would sell them diesel submarines. And what happened? The UK and the US told Australia, we will give you nuclear-powered submarines. And the whole deal with France just went down the toilet, and the French were very upset. And even though all of these countries, in the case of France and the UK and US, are NATO and allies and members, doesn't matter. You know, when it comes down to it, the Americans will put themselves first, definitely, before everybody and anyone, and they always do that. So there is a possibility, even if it's just a tiny possibility, that the Americans are waiting to see what happens and how the new leadership react to their cooperation with America. And having this general, this brigadier general that we just talked about, and his good ties with American officers and so on, that might be an avenue that they exploit. So they might be waiting for the French to get out, and then they will just usurp whatever resources and control the French had. You know, you have to understand that the anti-French and anti-colonial, it's really what it's about is anti-colonial. It's not about anti-French just for the sake of, you know, they don't like baguettes or something. No, this is people in Niger saying we are sick of being exploited. You should not underestimate the level of anti-colonial sentiment in Niger or any other country, right? They would rather, if it comes down to it, they will definitely choose the Americans over the French. But obviously their first choice would be the Russians. I'm just saying, don't underestimate the Americans. You saw this very recently when it came to AUKUS with the submarines, that the Americans screwed the French. They might as well just do it again now in Niger, right? Why not? If it puts them in a better position. And the Americans, another goal of theirs is not just to, you know, get the French out because they care so much about, you know, Niger's anti-colonial sentiment. No, they're going to do that so they put themselves in a better position and prevent Russia from coming onto the scene. Again, I'm just speculating here. This is just, you know, we're hypothesizing. I don't think it's necessarily, you know, likely, but it is a possibility, especially given recent events. It's just a possibility. Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen. You know, I think obviously what most people in Niger, and you heard what they were saying, what they want is both the Americans and the French to be gone, period. And it's so funny because the guy in the State Department, look at what he was saying about the Russian flags. I'll play you this clip.
Acting Deputy Secretary Nuland's meetings yesterday. Do you guys have any idea where things are going?
I will say that you're right. Acting Secretary Nuland met yesterday with leaders of the junta and made clear that there was a diplomatic path forward for them if they would choose a return to constitutional order. She also made clear that there would be consequences if they didn't, that there are hundreds of millions of dollars of U.S. assistance at stake. As she said last night in the call she had with the press, they were very difficult conversations. She didn't achieve any breakthroughs, and it's not at all clear that they will choose the diplomatic path forward. And I do want to emphasize that she also met with civil society leaders of NGOs while she was on the ground yesterday. She mentioned some of this. And in those meetings, she heard them express real concerns about the situation and express a desire for the country to return to a constitutional order. And I wanted to say something about that because I've gotten a lot of questions the last few days about so-called protests happening on the streets. And I think it's fair to note that not everyone that supports democracy in that country can take to the streets because of, you know, potential concerns about their safety. But she heard in their meetings that there is support in civil society for a return to constitutional order.
What a cope, man. He's acting like, yes, you know, literally tens of thousands of people are taking to the streets in support of the coup, but somebody told Victoria Nuland in private that they're down with democracy. I promise. Believe me.
So we will continue to press for that, but I think we are very clear-eyed about the situation as it stands.
Specifically referring to protests where people were waving Russian flags?
I am.
Is that what you're talking about?
I am.
And do you think that that's a significant issue that needs to be addressed?
I think I have heard questions about these protests sometimes in this briefing room, and sometimes you see people assume that because you see people on the streets, it's an expression of actual support rather than people who might have been paid to show up at protests. It does seem odd to me that if your country is suffering an attempted military takeover, the idea that the first thing anyone would do is run to a store and buy a Russian flag, that strikes me as somewhat an unlikely scenario. But I wanted to emphasize that what we or what?
Sorry, but the way he puts it is kind of funny. Let me respond with this. I hear you, and I hear what you're saying. What I also find even less likely is that Russia has paid people and given them secret Russian flags to randomly whip out and hoist the moment a junta takes over in Niger. I find that even less likely. Okay, just get over it, man. Get over it. This is not the first time this happens. Okay, you have to understand. It's a rejection of France and it's a rejection of the West. And you have US bases in Niger, right? You have the United States going around, not just Pakistan, as I showed you, but equally in Africa, just like in Asia, trying to pressure African countries into submitting to their rule and condemning Russia, sanctioning Russia, voting against Russia at the United Nations General Assembly, etc., etc. And it's not working, and it's not going to work because people have wisened up to that. It's not only that, they become more bold because they've realized they've got nothing to lose. The West have underdeveloped and stolen from these countries for so long, and then they give them like a few pennies. It's like with Syria, right? Like the United States is stealing so much oil and then gives like $100 million in humanitarian aid. The oil that you stole is worth billions over a couple of years. What do you mean 100 million? That's nothing. That's chicken shit. Same thing with the African countries. The French take so much uranium and then throw a few pennies and act like they're doing them a favor. No, people are sick of that. They've wisened up to it and they're done. He keeps using the word democracy. I mean, people hate democracy when they understand what the West means by democracy. They don't actually mean democracy, right? It means control of your resources, military bases in your country. People are sick of that word. They're sick of hearing it. And another point I wanted to make is that what I read to you in the Wall Street Journal, let me go back to this quote here. You see here how they say, oh, look, the United States has given you 500 million, 110 million. That wasn't Niger's defense forces. When America spends $110 million on a drone base, that's not building up Niger's defense forces. That's building up America's defense forces. Who wrote this sentence? Just look at this logic. It's like, you should thank us for putting a drone base in your country. We are building up your defenses. No, this is a U.S. drone base, and it's operated by the U.S. It's owned by the U.S., and it has U.S. personnel on it. It doesn't belong to Niger. Niger doesn't need the fucking base. You put it there because it's good for you. Again, this is the colonial mentality. It's like the railways in India, right? You have people to this day who are so ignorant and dumb who think that, well, India should be grateful that we built them these railways. No, we built the railways in India so we could speed up the theft of their shit. Do you understand? The railways were built so British companies could steal stuff from India faster. They weren't built because we like, donating railways to India. Yeah, what is this logic? It's the same thing here. Neo-colonial shit, right? Like, you should thank us. Thank us for putting thousands of foreign troops in your country to fight a threat that exists only because of our actions, right? Look, man, before invasion of Iraq in 2003, there was no such thing as Daesh or ISIS. This did not exist. Before the CIA was funding the Mujahideen, there was no such thing as Al-Qaeda. This exists as a direct consequence of the CIA's actions. These jihadist Islamist groups in both Iraq and Syria and in the Sahara in Niger and Burkina Faso and Mali, they exist as a direct consequence of NATO destroying Libya and destabilizing North Africa and the Middle East. Direct consequence. So it's like somebody giving you cancer and then selling you, chemotherapy. It's the same thing. That's perfect analogy. What can I say? What can I say? You know, they're in for a big shock. They're in for a big shock. They're in for a big shock. It's over. Bye-bye. Say bye-bye to the colonies. Say bye-bye. Look, one after the other, they're falling. You know, this is what the history books should amend and correct. This is the real era of decolonization now, 2023, 2022, 2021, when you had these West African countries kicking out the French. That's decolonization. The next step is to get rid of the CFA franc, this colonial money, and you know, pursue other avenues and ways of you know, true independence. That's what it's about. I'm telling you, Niger is not going to be the last country where this happens, but I find it insane how, you know, here they say because there's a military takeover in Niger, the United States has to legally suspend the aid, right? This so-called assistance. There it is in the Wall Street Journal. They say in the wake of the military revolt, the U.S. suspended its training of Nigerian forces and cut some other military assistance. And should the State Department formally declare the uprising a coup, American law would require further reductions in military aid. Okay, well, here's the thing. Pakistan, which I was just talking about a few minutes ago, and I've been reporting on Pakistan for you know, over a year now with what's happening with Imran Khan. That was a coup engineered by the State Department, by the United States, right? They issued a threat to the Pakistani ambassador in Washington. They told him, if you get rid of Imran Khan, we will forget all about your neutral stance on Ukraine, which we don't consider neutral. We consider it adversarial. You know, I mean, it was genuinely neutral. Genuinely neutral. But for the Americans, you cannot be neutral. You have to be with them or they will kill you, get rid of you, depose you. Right? So they threatened them, and now that Imran Khan is gone, they've tried to assassinate him. They put him in prison multiple times. People in his party have been imprisoned. They've tried to bar him from running in the next elections because they know he is the most powerful, not powerful, but most popular politician in the country. And as a consequence, he wields great power and influence with the people, you know, which is the very essence of democracy, that the people want this man. They still got rid of him. And now Pakistan, look at the situation. The military, which has always played a very strong role, the military are now even, you know, stronger than they were before, to the point that Pakistan is no longer a democracy. You know, the civil rights and civil liberties have eroded. They've trampled on people's rights because people, they love Imran Khan so much. You had massive rallies, massive, you know, outpouring of support, that they had to basically contain the civil unrest, because they just could not accept the situation that their prime minister has been removed, and you know, they're tainting him and trying to bar him from running for office. So as a consequence, both Imran Khan and his supporters are in prison, and you have less civil rights. The institution, right? The democratic institution in Pakistan, when it comes to having, you know, real elections of deciding, the people deciding who their leader is, all of this is gone. Do you think the United States has suspended military aid to Pakistan? No, because the whole point was to keep Pakistan as a giant military base, right? So do you see the irony here? When it comes to Niger, because you got rid of our puppet, the one who lets us put military bases and steal your resources, sorry, that's a military takeover, right? And even though most people support this coup because they hate colonialism, and by its very essence, it is democratic, because it is what the people want in Niger. They want a free country, an independent country without U.S. and French influence. No, that's a military coup. Now we have to put sanctions on you. Now we have to cut assistance. We have to cut aid. But in Pakistan, where this guy was democratically elected, and now we make sure that he's gone, and now the country has become more militaristic and it's more authoritarian. Oh, the aid keeps flowing because our guy is now in power. Do you see the double standard here? It's disgusting. And you know, Victoria Nuland, although she's not mentioned in this meeting, right, between the State Department, between Don Lu and the Pakistani ambassador. She's not there, but we all know that, you know, from the rap sheet, she's been in every administration since George Bush. Every single administration, she somehow manages to fail upwards and find her place, and now she has become the number 2 person in the State Department, which is, again, the foreign ministry, you know, the American foreign ministry. So by these actions, I mean, and her involvement, I find it so difficult to think that, you know, she had no role in Pakistan. I find that very difficult. It's just that we haven't seen a trace of it. But I find it very difficult to believe that, you know, she was involved in Ukraine and Niger, but not Pakistan. No, she's definitely involved. She is always involved. She is the devil incarnate, this woman, right? She's definitely involved. And even if she weren't, this doesn't change the point that the Americans are meddling in the internal affairs of other countries, not just with invasions, but through their so-called diplomats who are really just bullies in suits, right? Diplomacy is like finding common interest, right? And you know, doing things with mutual respect. The whole point, the word to be diplomatic, what does that mean? You know, this phrase that we have in English, to be diplomatic, means to be, you know, to put things nicely. But they don't do that. They come and threaten, right? Victoria Nuland marches into Niger and makes threats. The Pakistani ambassador is threatened by the State Department and told to remove his prime minister and get rid of him. That's not diplomacy. These people are neoconservative war hawks. And the fact that every administration employs such people, you know, and tasks them with these huge responsibilities shows you that no matter whether you're dealing with a Republican administration or a Democrat administration, or a Democratic administration, you are always dealing with these characters, right? They don't change their behavior. There's a constant here. The neoconservatives are omnipresent, right? And this is why you have a coup in Niger, because people are sick of this stuff, precisely this stuff.